The year is 2001. The console war rages on. You had to make a big decision. Sony's PlayStation 2 or Microsoft's Xbox?
While the PlayStation 2 had some good titles, there was one title that the Xbox had up its sleeve that took the world by storm. Halo has remained one of the most influential first-person shooters that people still marvel at today. Just take one glance at the cover and you could tell. This game was huge. As a launch title of the Xbox, it did a spectacular job showcasing what the Xbox was capable of against its main competitor, the PlayStation 2.
At the time, Sony didn't really have anything to compete against Halo. It was certainly released at a great time, and that was a driving factor for people to go out and buy the Xbox. But the question is, why was it so good?
While first-person shooters were something we have seen before with the likes of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, we haven't seen quite to the level that Halo offered. Back then, buying games was a bit more of a gamble than it is today. We didn't have easy access to footage or media. But Microsoft has done an excellent job marketing Halo and their console at game stores and various flyers. Another thing the Xbox had over its competitor is online capabilities known as Xbox Live, a monthly subscription that gives you access to play online with your friends and families. This lifted the ceiling of Halo and even garnered enough reputation to start its own esports.
Keep in mind, FPS as a console exclusive is kind of a no-no in this day and age. PC gaming wasn't quite as large as it is today, but it did have a large audience, especially since the Counter-Strike scene was on the rise, and other games like Deus Ex, Diablo 2, and Command & Conquer were already released. Now, I know, Halo was released for PC, and Mac OS, believe it or not, 2 years later, but Halo was indeed a console-only game that was directly competing with not only Sony fans, but also PC fans. Halo revolutionized more than just the controls for its time. It had the best AI, best physics, and best graphics of any console FPS, and it more or less introduced console players to LAN play, a great part of Halo's success. Another great part of Halo's success was the weight of the game. Much like today, in order to get someone's attention, you have to get them hooked in the first few minutes. And in order to accomplish any of that, the game has to feel great. There is a certain feel and weight to the character that makes every game unique and different. A great part of Halo's success was the weight of the game, and this is where art and design come into play. Players had a horizontal and vertical reticle movement that was relatively slow, while the model of the players could move relatively fast and jump high. This type of physics, with the mechanics of a slowly recharging shield, mixed perfectly with the movement of a controller. And if you said you use a controller now instead of the superior mouse and keyboard, you will simply be laughed out of the lobby. Not only that, but Halo was one of the first console FPSs to integrate vehicles as it did. The vehicles felt great, so adding vehicles to the game was very important and didn't feel forced at all. You could easily run around on foot and take players one-on-one, or get in the vehicle and wreak havoc with your friend in the gunner seat. This was also great because when you were running through the game, nothing was more badass than seeing a pelican drop off a warthog in front of you. It just felt epic.
And with great vehicles also comes a great and compelling story with FMV cutscenes. While now they look dated today, at the time it looked impressive. Leaps and bounds ahead of what we saw on the previous generation of consoles. The story takes place at the Pillar of Autumn. We get our first look at the Covenants as they attack the ship. With the ship heavily damaged, Captain Jacob Keyes leads the ship to an AI known as Cortana and the main character, Master Chief. After successfully retreating from the Pillar of Autumn, we get word that Jacob Keyes has been kidnapped from the Covenant. So it's up to Master Chief and Cortana to go after the Covenant and rescue Jacob Keyes. What awaits us is not only a simple story, but many surprises. With the inclusion of all the action set pieces and the stellar voice acting, it keeps you engaged till the very end.
Listen, I'll try to make this as simple as possible. In order to add to a good story, you have to have good storytellers. So why not choose the best? And funny enough, one of the best stories of all time in video game history comes from a game in which the main character hardly says a word. This is what we call in the voice acting world, creating an atmosphere. This strategy carries the idea that all the other characters in a game or a movie are just as important as the main character. And Jen Taylor, the voice actress of Cortana, was the perfect fit for the role. This was an interesting choice. In fact, for a long time, Jason Jones, the main director at Bungie at the time, hated the idea of the main character that is constantly in the game that you couldn't play or even see. Because most of the time, Cortana is a voice in your head and only visibly seen for a short amount of time. It wasn't until he heard Jen in the studio for a few auditions and saw that she was the perfect fit. It was so natural that it had to be in the game.
At this point, voice acting has reached way beyond what we have seen up until now. I mean, we've seen our fair share of awful voice acting with PlayStation titles.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
But Halo didn't only have great voice acting, it also had a masterful soundtrack. Composed by Martin O'Donnell, he did an excellent job of making you feel more part of Master Chief's journey. Some notable tracks include Installation 4 and Bravery Brotherhood. Installation 4 is iconic and instantly recognized by gamers everywhere. What I appreciate about the soundtrack in Halo is they're not all rock-infused themes. There are some beautiful tracks that are calmer, like Erebor Above. It makes the whole soundtrack feel more balanced between the two subgenres.
When one thinks of space and aliens, you typically think of electronic music and very strange sounds and not orchestral music. What O'Donnell was trying to do was create a vast, epic feel. You're not just concentrating on the fact that you're fighting aliens. You have a sense that you are humanity's one and only hope, and everything depends on you. O'Donnell knew that. And when you're in combat and a plasma beam is flying past your head, the strings of an orchestra can be rushed and have very fast-paced vibratos to reflect the urgency of combat. But when you're in space and you see a giant halo ring in the distance and the world around you is calm, the music reflects that.
Now that we proved Halo is a wonderful game, what console can you play it on?
We highly suggest playing the Halo games on PC. Not only is it beautiful, but it has been optimized. You also have the option to change to the old textures if you so desire.
With all of this, I think you'll all get a better picture of what Halo was like.
It was an important game that not only made a name for itself, but paved the way for FPS games moving forward.